Hi, I'm John Burke, Principal Research Analyst here with Nemertes Research, and it's a great pleasure to get to talk to you today about SD-WAN. It's not all about the rates, SD-WAN savings beyond MPLS rates. So we'll begin by introducing Nemertes for those of you who are not familiar with us and our work. We'll lay the groundwork for what we mean when we're talking about SD-WAN and touch the topic of how broadly SD-WAN is deployed in the enterprise currently. We'll then talk about those savings, the rates and the savings that are possible on them, but we'll push past that and talk about savings on network operations and the value that SD-WAN can bring on enterprise agility and on enterprise security fronts as well. We'll wrap it up with some recommendations and information about the upcoming webinar next month on security. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, Nemertes is a research and strategic consulting firm, and we're focused on analyzing the business impact of deploying emerging technologies. Our primary mode of research, therefore, is to talk to enterprises and the IT practitioners within them about what effect deploying emerging technologies has had on their businesses, and to talk to them about what has worked and what has not worked in the course of deploying those technologies. So looking for best practices, looking for useful metrics for measuring the impact of specific technologies across a broad range of areas. One of the things that we've been studying since, well, pretty much the founding of the company back in 2002 is the wide area network. And of course, through that period from 2002 until the present, have been tracking the first introduction and then the rapid rise of MPLS as the primary means of connecting branch offices to data centers and to each other, and providing that backbone wide area network for the enterprise. A typical branch today, therefore, is something that is connected to the MPLS network and has access through that to the data center, and typically through the data center only to the broader internet. Most branches have only a single connection on that MPLS network, and if they're lucky enough to have any kind of backup connectivity, have it solely by virtue of an internet VPN connection. Basically, that is sitting there unused unless and until the MPLS link fails. When that link fails, services will fail over to the internet VPN link, but because that failover is not quick, even when it's automated, and of course isn't always automated, there will be an interruption of services when it takes place. And so if there are VoIP calls in progress, if there are video conferences in progress, if there are ERP sessions or VDI sessions in progress, they will fail, they will break, they will stop and have to be reestablished after everything fails over to the new link. And of course, given that when MPLS service is restored, IT is faced with the dilemma: do I break all the sessions again in order to switch back to the MPLS core, or do I wait and do this all after hours in the middle of the night sometime, making people struggle with what is typically not as robust a connection in the interim, and then of course having to put in the overnight hours on the IT side to get things switched back over at a time of minimal user impact. So not the greatest of pictures, and not the greatest of pictures for a number of reasons. Starting with the fact that you are, as an enterprise, as a business, paying for a lot of bandwidth that you're not using 99+% of the time. You've got that failover internet link there and you're not using it on a day-to-day basis. You're also depending for connectivity to all of your branches on what is the costliest option, MPLS. And it's also the one that has the longest lead times. So if you're interested in moving a branch or spinning up a new location, you have to plan months in advance to make sure that you'll have connectivity when it's time to start doing business in that location. You're in a situation where MPLS problems mean outages for end users. If the MPLS link goes down, services break. They may not break for a long time. It may be a minute, it may be even under a minute, but it's enough to make people restart all of the sessions that they've got in progress. And the service restoration has exactly the same effect. So you either have to schedule it outside use hours, if there is such a thing in your business, or you have to, again, break everything that's happening now in order to fail back over to your primary and preferred mode of connectivity. Another big issue is that in the current paradigm, most organizations manage routers individually. They treat each one specially. It has its own unique configuration, and on the whole, routers are treated more like prize roses, nurtured as individuals rather than treated like corn, cultivated as a commodity crop. This makes it challenging to make changes to the network, to introduce new services, for example, to introduce new connectivity in a specific site, or to change the way sites talk to each other. Also in this paradigm, if you want to do things like prioritize traffic or optimize traffic, you typically have to add more appliances in the branch to accomplish that, which increases the capital cost of a new location and slows down deployment there even further. And lastly, and this is a sticking point that becomes steadily more important as we progress down the road of equalizing the amount of work we do outside our data centers with the amount that we do inside. As you make use of SaaS solutions or infrastructure as a service solutions, all the traffic that's going to or from those service providers to users in the branch offices has to go through the data center and across that very expensive wide area network MPLS link. And it's not optimal from a performance standpoint, and it's of course not optimal from a cost standpoint. So that's the environment into which SD-WAN has launched itself. And it arose initially from the radical proposition that it should be easy to manage your WAN and that you should get use out of all of the connectivity that you have going into a location. Nothing should have to sit there unused just in case. So as a baseline, SD-WAN solutions will let you take those failover internet links that most branches have if they don't have a second MPLS link and use them simultaneously. And not just use them, but use them intelligently so that you're sending traffic down MPLS when it has some behavioral characteristics and sending other traffic with different behavioral characteristics down the internet link. And this is the kicker, failing over transparently from either link to the other link so that sessions in progress don't even necessarily notice that anything has happened. And that becomes very important as you consider the impact on end users. So with the idea that using all of the capacity available to you is step one for the SD-WAN, the software-defined WAN, what else can you bring to the party to make it easier to manage the WAN? Well, one more thing that you can add is virtualization in both directions. So taking all of the available links and making them available for network traffic as a pool of capacity, that's virtualizing downwards. You're virtualizing things below the level of the WAN in terms of physical links. And that gives you greater capacity at the same time that it gives you greater resilience, allows that transparent failover. How about virtualizing in the other direction as well? Virtualizing upwards and saying, why have a single WAN when I can have multiple logical WANs, virtual WANs, overlaid on that pool of available bandwidth? Then some things that need to talk directly branch to branch can have a WAN for that. Other things that I have to route through my data center for one reason or another can have a virtual WAN for that. And they can work side by side. They can work over the same pools of connectivity, but the traffic can be segregated and handled distinctly based on the application, based on the users, based on the requirements of security or performance or what have you. So using all the links, using them flexibly, and making it easy to manage in that context. So getting out of that prize rose paradigm of managing nodes one by one individually, and instead configuring the WAN, not individual routers on the WAN, but configuring the WAN, defining a policy in a central policy definition console and having it propagate automatically out to every place in the wide area network that that policy is needed, that it has an effect. And using that same basic mechanism of policy-based management applied to the whole of the WAN to control performance and apply techniques ranging from prioritization of one application over another to compression in solutions that allow for that, to more exotic technologies like forward error correction, where you're adding a little bit of extra overhead on each packet so that if one packet gets dropped, it can be reassembled using information from other packets, and that prevents retransmits of those packets and thereby improves the performance of, for example, real-time communications tools or other technologies that are very sensitive to packet loss, VoIP, video conferencing, VDI sessions, things like that. You can use the same mechanism of policies defined centrally and enforced globally to implement security measures, defining first and foremost whether or not traffic will be allowed to flow from a particular application. And if so, with what kinds of security features layered on? Will there be additional levels of encryption? Will you be routing that traffic through a data center and through an intrusion detection and prevention system, or through a data leak prevention or data loss prevention system? Will you be routing it through, and this is in the sense of chaining services together, will you be routing it through an external cloud-based security service, perhaps a CASB type arrangement before sending the traffic on to a different branch? All of these things are possible in really robust SD-WAN solutions. And lastly, of course, as we discussed, when you have the ability to have more than one logical WAN, a virtual WAN overlaid on the physical ones, then you've got the option of defining the topology of each one of those separately. So each application can have the topology that's suitable for it, VoIP, a mesh topology, so every branch can send traffic directly to every other branch. Other things, and dependent on the business, it could be anything from instant messaging to VoIP calling might have to pass through some kind of central hub for security reasons, again, for making a copy of traffic for audit purposes or for filtering for data leak or loss possibilities. So letting policy defined centrally, applied globally, define everything about traffic, from the pattern in which it's allowed to flow over the network to the performance improvements that will be attempted on its behalf. All of that is definitional to SD-WAN as a field and speaks to some long simmering discontent with the state of the wide area network, which speaks to how quickly SD-WAN solutions are finding their way into the enterprise. Although as a distinct field, it's only a couple of years old at this point, we already see almost 20% of the companies in our most recent cloud and data center benchmark using SD-WAN already, another nearly 10% planning to deploy it during this calendar year. So in a month or two, that number should actually be, close to 36, 37%. That is interesting by itself, but when you take a closer look at the data and look specifically at the companies in the benchmark who were most successful overall in their management and use of cloud and data center resources, they're already deploying at more than twice the rate of the general population, which suggests that this is on a very fast track to very broad deployment in the enterprise. It's also important to note, and we'll dive into this in more detail, that in addition to whatever other benefits they're realizing, the early adopters here that we're talking to are reporting 92% reduction in the outages they're experiencing in their branch offices that have the technology, 95% reductions in the amount of time they spend troubleshooting WAN tickets on those sites. And we will come back to those points both. Now, SD-WAN comes in two primary flavors. The overlay flavor, which is appliance-based, and so you've got appliances, either physical or virtual boxes, sitting in the branch offices, sitting in the data centers, potentially running in a cloud virtual data center like in Azure or AWS, and providing optimized and policy-directed WAN flows among those locations. It sits behind the router in some cases, or it takes the place of the router in other cases. Ideally, you're taking the place of the router in order to simplify that branch technology stack, not make it more complicated. That isn't always possible. And an overlay solution can deliver a complete SD-WAN solution using just the appliances that you're installing. It's possible, though, for there to be supplementary services available that are delivered via the cloud. For example, one provider has cloud gateways, and you can direct internet-bound traffic from branch offices out through the cloud gateway and get in the directest possible way to the destination for that traffic. So overlay is one option. In-net is the other. The idea here being that there may be a dedicated appliance on premises, but there doesn't have to be. And most or all of the SD-WAN services that are available are delivered through the service provider's cloud. And so some kinds of services, like if you need to do hardcore data compression because you've got a very small pipe going into the branch, that's something that requires a box on the premises. A few other functions might require a box on the premises, but not everything does, and anything that doesn't is delivered via the service cloud exclusively. So the idea is, from your branch office, from your data center, you connect into the service provider's cloud, either a direct link to their nearest point of presence, or going in through the internet to get to their cloud via an internet VPN, and from that point on, they serve as your WAN backbone. Whether you're going for overlay or whether you're going for in-house, in-net or some combination depending on the size and shape of your business, you need to build a business case for making the investment in making this change, because there is going to be an investment. There's going to be some upfront costs. There's going to be the period of overlap when you're supporting the old solution and delivering the new solution, and there's going to be the cost of making the transition itself in terms especially of staff time. So you need to build a business case, obviously, for making this kind of a change and this kind of an investment. And as we imply with the title and as we have discussed in previous webinars, the opportunity to substitute lower cost connectivity for that very high cost, relatively high cost MPLS capacity is the engine driving most business cases, and oftentimes is sufficient. But if you're in a business where you're not going to give up your MPLS at all, where the real savings aren't going to come for 3 or 4 years, your CFO or your C-level leadership may be reluctant to make an investment now if the payoff's not going to be for 3 years. So it's important to understand the other values that can be delivered right up front, as soon as you start using the technology. And they start with agility. And I mentioned this earlier, the idea that you're going to need to spin up a new branch in a new location, or move a branch from an old place to a new place. Maybe it's a bank branch, literally, or maybe it's a retail store location or a restaurant. And you're going to start up a new one, and you're going to need connectivity for it. And are you going to have to wait 3 to 6 months to bring services up in that location, because that's how long it's going to take to get an MPLS link provision to that location? Or would you rather be able to say, we took ownership on this site Tuesday, it's already physically suited to us. If we can get our infrastructure in, we can have it up and running in a week. Well, if you're in a position with an SD-WAN solution to say, sure, drop a box in, we'll run LTE connectivity into it initially, or the consumer-grade internet that we can get from the building next door, we'll get you up and running on the network in a day, if that's what it takes, or 2 days, or a week, and you can start deriving profits from that location immediately. Enterprise agility is definitely one of those cases where speed has value, as Bill Gates so famously said a couple of decades ago. And of course, when you are talking about costs, another big driver, it's important to look past those MPLS rates and think about other possibilities for changing your cost structures. Your business may want to stop using CapEx to drive its WAN. It may want to shift to an operational model. SD-WAN technologies and companies are ideally suited to that. Currently, many or most, if not all of them, have a no CapEx model available, where you're basically subscribing to the service on a monthly basis, which makes perfect sense in an in-net scenario and is increasingly popular in the overlay scenario as well. So you're having the opportunity of deferring or eliminating capital costs. And importantly, because you're not equipping your WAN for the next 5 to 7 years, because you're basically equipping it for the next 6 to 12 months, you don't have to buy capacity that you don't need. You know, if it's an office location and you're only going to have 20 users there at first, and it may grow to several hundred over the next couple of years, you don't have to buy the router that's going to suit the 500-person location when it's a 50-person location. You can bring in the SD-WAN device that suits the 50 people, and as a part of the annual renewal of the operating arrangement by which it's there, upgrade capacity as needed. As mentioned, and we'll talk about this in more detail, reducing the amount of troubleshooting time and the impact of outages on end users can be important from an enterprise perspective, especially if you're in a business that can easily enough map user downtime to dollars lost or dollars not made. If you're an online retailer or in some other business where there's a strong internet component to what you do, and you know that when you don't get traffic through, you're not earning dollars or you're actively losing dollars, then you can draw a direct line from reducing the number of outages and reducing performance problems to the bottom line, to the revenues that can be driven, actually to the top line too. And lastly, with security a continuing source of concern and growing concern in light of the breadth and depth of compromises that keep coming in the news, any solution that helps you improve the security of your WAN is worth a look for that point alone. And in an environment where routers are often left without getting firmware patches or operating system patches for years at a time, just because nobody wants to mess with them on the chance of breaking them entirely, and because other things seem to have a higher priority, you can put yourself in a situation where instead patches like that can be rolled out as soon as they arrive from the vendor. Or indeed, if it's an in-net kind of a solution where those kinds of fixes are just pushed out automatically and put in service immediately, dramatically reducing the threat surface of the organization from known and unpatched problems. So although we don't want to focus all attention on the savings that are possible by substituting lower cost connectivity for higher, we would be remiss in saying, in not saying that you can save an awful lot of money by substituting lower cost connectivity for higher cost. We worked with a client this past spring with a couple of hundred sites on their WAN. They have MPLS. They fully intend to keep MPLS, but they are worried that in a period in the next few years where they picture very dramatic growth in their demand for bandwidth as they roll out a whole bunch of new, more modern tools, especially in communications, they don't want to have to do all that growing on their current MPLS platform. They would be looking at some really eye-watering kinds of increases in costs from well under $1 million a year to closer to 5. By shifting their growth on MPLS off, shifting it instead to business internet connectivity, in most cases a few consumer internet links where they couldn't get business, they are anticipating saving in excess of $4 million a year by 2019, just by shifting growth off of their MPLS network, not by decreasing their use of MPLS in any way. And of course, re-architecting your network to get rid of MPLS is a major challenge in most people's minds and hearts. It's a huge risk to take on. And consequently, most of the folks that we've spoken to who are using SD-WAN, who are exploring SD-WAN, they're not planning on dropping MPLS even when they deploy SD-WAN fully. And they won't drop it in the next 5 years, next 7 years. Most of them are looking 10 years out before they really are contemplating it being gone from their networks, if it ever is. And the big reason is that shifting off of it too quickly is seen as creating an unnecessary amount of risk. And of course, if your goal is solely to save money on MPLS rates, you don't have to go through the potential risks and pains of making this kind of a transition if all you're after is shaving 10% off your MPLS rates. We did an MPLS rates benchmark in the second half of this year and found that most of the people who we got data from and that we analyzed had plenty of room for negotiation of better prices. And especially when they look forward, as they think about shifting from mostly 10 meg links to mostly 100 meg links, or mostly 1.5 meg links to mostly 10 meg links, they have the opportunity to renegotiate pricing on the bandwidths they're headed to, and thereby getting a lot more bandwidth at a lower cost than just scaling up the way they're working now. And if that is something that you're interested in, knowing where you stand with respect to your MPLS rates compared to the market, give us a ring or reach out to us through the website and contact us and ask us, and we can talk about doing a benchmark comparison, your rates against the market. But that said, MPLS rates, you can't generally shave 80 to 90% off them, and if you are of a mind to make a major shift off MPLS and would contemplate shifting most of your traffic to the business internet or commodity internet, you can reduce your spending by 80, 90%. And that's huge. That's not something that you can just renegotiate and get down to. But leaving that aside now, leaving MPLS rates aside entirely and looking past that, let's talk again about those operational savings, both for the business and IT. As I noted earlier, downtime in branches is reduced in excess of 90% for the folks who are using SD-WAN. No surprise, that's one of the foundational goals of the technology, to give a seamless failover from link to link in the case of inevitable link issues. And in fact, with more links being active and in use, and potentially more links being provisioned than in the past, link problems become even more inevitable. You've got more links, there's going to be more problems. But the big deal is that they're not problems for end users. They're not hurting productivity. They're not idling facilities. And so they become far less urgent an issue for IT staff. Consequently, IT, in addition to having fewer outages to troubleshoot, is not dropping everything to deal with outages when they occur if they're only hitting one of the links going into a site. They instead take more of a wait-and-see attitude, because most WAN problems do clear up on their own. They're resolved by the network engineers at the carrier or the service provider behind the scenes. If you report it and then just follow up and see when it comes back online, you're doing due diligence rather than troubleshooting, and consequently spending a lot less time on each problem when it comes up. It's also good to note, and this is something that people who deployed already told us, these SD-WAN solutions typically can provide very detailed and very accurate information to provide to the service provider to help them isolate the problem on their network. and at least one said that they had become a very good partner of their service provider. Giving them back the information from the SD-WAN solution led to major and long-standing improvements in the service they were getting from the provider in the first place, because they were able to root out some fairly obscure engineering issues that were being masked and not entirely visible in their own internal reporting. Now, I mentioned that a lot of people are putting off patching their WAN routers, and this is a long-standing problem and endemic to enterprises broadly. SD-WAN presents the possibility of getting out of the mindset of, I'm not going to patch until I absolutely have no choice, and instead into a much more proactive, I'll patch as soon as there's a stable patch to install, because patches can be rolled out quickly, rolled back quickly, and done with a minimum of IT effort. It's not a matter of logging into each device individually, upgrading it, and seeing how well it works and rolling it back individually if it fails. It's instead a matter of pushing out a policy and checking to see that everything functions well in the aftermath, and if it doesn't, rolling it back through the same kind of centralized policy-based operation. So that raises the overall security profile of the enterprise and makes a smaller threat surface for the enterprise generally. And lastly, it's good to mention too that by segmenting WAN traffic onto application-specific virtual WANs, where a small number of applications traffic, or maybe just a single application's traffic is collected and sent and kept separate from the traffic of all the other WANs, you're actually reducing the amount of traffic that any individual application infrastructure will see, and again reducing the threat surface of the infrastructure at the back end to some extent. And that also just again goes to raising the overall security profile of the organization, reducing both security and operational risks as a result. And top-line benefits. As I mentioned, that business agility aspect of SD-WAN is not to be undersold. And if you're in any kind of a business that can quantify the value of a day of operations in a location, if you can, as IT, say, look, we can have connectivity in there whenever the rest of the business is ready. You don't have to start 6 months early just to give us time to get connectivity there. You can put a dollar figure on how many days you, as IT, have shaved off the process of starting up that new branch or relocating a branch. You're also in a position to support some newer business initiatives. We see a lot of interest in things like digital signage or other Internet of Things type opportunities. SD-WAN traffic management can be great for IoT type solutions, taking traffic that's bound to or from an internet service provider directly from the branch to that cloud service, rather than from the branch to the data center out to the cloud service and back. And that should improve the performance of those options and give you a better return on the IoT investment that you're hoping to make. So top-line benefits, actually driving more profits and doing more business as a result of deploying the technology. Another key benefit to consider, in addition to, of course, any savings you might be able to realize in other avenues. So with that, we'll make some recommendations. First, we recommend that everybody who has a WAN at least explore the possibilities of SD-WAN in their environment, not just for the cost savings on connectivity that are possible, and they can be quite dramatic, but also for the savings that are possible elsewhere in WAN operations, in capital expenditures for branch locations, and of course, benefits beyond hard dollar savings in risk reduction and service improvements and productivity improvements, and of course, top-line type benefits that might come with improved business and branching agility. When you explore SD-WAN, if it looks like there's a there for you, look at a broad array of options. There are at least 20 companies out there that can give you, excuse me, that can give you something that you can call SD-WAN, ranging from those overlay vendors with their appliance-based solutions to the in-net providers and their cloud-based solutions. Any shortlist that you develop should encompass those two base options, overlay and in-net, and you should probably always also, in addition to looking at a do-it-yourself solution where you're basically responsible for managing it, you should pretty much always look at a managed solution as well, and those are also proliferating quickly. Plan to do at least a couple of proofs of concept. So these solutions are meant to be deployed in a phased way. They're meant to be deployed a little way, and then more, and then more. So doing a proof of concept on one or a couple at a time is actually possible, and without a major investment of IT time. In evaluating the options and in evaluating the solutions that you try out on site, remember that all of this is about driving the business, so make sure that the SD-WAN solutions that you select, if you select one, are driving the WAN to better serve the needs of the business, and work with the business if you can to quantify the value that SD-WAN can deliver, quantify the value of faster branch startup, quantify the value of making new services available faster like digital signage, quantify the value of improved uptime in the branches or improved application performance. And with that, I'll say, if you're interested in discussing this further with us or getting more information about the research, you can, if you're a client, of course, contact client-services@nemertes.com or call 1-888-241-2685 and connect to client services. If you're not a client but you would like to be one or have access to the research or our services, please contact sales@nemertes.com or again call 1-888-241-2685 and select sales from the menu. Our next webinar coming up on Tuesday, December 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time is Analyze This, Threat Analytics, the Key to Next Generation Security. My boss and our security practice lead, Jonna Till-Johnson, our CEO, will be presenting, and she'll be discussing next generation cybersecurity and how it will rely heavily on the use of advanced security analytics, including behavioral threat analytics. These are tools that don't try to control who gets onto the network, not like network access control, NAC. Instead, they observe the behavior of the users and devices already on the network in real time and apply machine logic to determining when behavior is anomalous versus typical, when anomalous behavior represents a threat, and when that threat represents a real risk to the business. So adding a lot of wisdom and knowledge to the information, to the data that actual behavior represents. We'll be discussing where advanced security analytics fit into a next generation security architecture and where behavioral threat analytics fit into a security analytics architecture. We'll talk about business cases, we'll talk about use cases, and we'll do all of that on Tuesday, December 13th at 2 p.m. You can register via our website, www.nemertes.com. And with that, I will say thank you and hope that you'll join us next time.